going to be talking about mumps disease. It's a very contagious viral infection. We're going to start there, so let's dive right into it. My name is Zoe Henderson, and we're taking microbiology, and this is my project. All right, ladies and gents, let's talk about the characteristics. Well, it's a single-stranded RNA virus, and it primarily affects the salivary glands, but can involve other organs in severe cases. It's a causative agent, meaning mumps virus is single-stranded, and the transmission is spread or occurs through respiratory droplets, saliva, or direct contact with contaminated objects, like utensils or tissues. Now, ladies and gents, without further ado, let's talk about the history of mumps. Now, mumps dates all the way back to 5th century BCE, as you can see on the screen. In the 17th and 18th century, mumps had an epidemic, especially in the 17th century. Now, in the 18th century, that's where we see mumps and orchitis get linked. Mumps was also discovered by Hippocrates, the Greek physician. He described an illness with swelling near the ears and associated fever. Reflecting the characteristic of swollen salivary glands, orchitis is testicular swelling in males during outbreaks. The mumps vaccine was combined with measles and rubella vaccines in the MMR vaccine, significantly reducing mumps cases worldwide. Now, a continuation of the complications. Well, we have hearing loss, damage to the cochlear cells of the inner ear, infertility, which is rare, testicle damages in several cases of orchitis, and neurological damage, rare, but possible in cases of meningitis. Now, pancreatitis is very severe stomach pains. Now that you definitely need a doctor for as well. So, ladies and gents, now we're talking about how to identify mumps in a lab. Now, if you're a doctor and you think someone has mumps based on their swollen cheeks and other symptoms, you might want to confirm it in a lab. So here's how they figure it out. If it's really mumps, first you want to collect samples. To test for mumps, doctors need a sample from the body where the virus might be present. This could include saliva, swab of the nose or throat, a blood sample, urine in some cases. And 2, test used in the lab. Now we go with a reverse transcription polymerase chain reaction test. This test looks for genetic material, RNA, of course, of the mumps virus in the sample. Scientists extract the RNA and make copies. And you know why it's cool? It's super accurate and can tell if it's mumps even before symptoms fully appear. Then we have virus cultures. Scientists grow the mumps virus in a special environment, like a petri dish or a test tube, to confirm it's there. Fun fact, this is like growing a tiny mumps garden to see if the virus shows up. It kind of takes a few days, but it is a reliable method. And then we have a blood test, serology. Blood tests look for antibodies, proteins your immune system makes to fight infections. If someone has mumps, their body makes 2 types of antibodies, IgM antibodies and IgG antibodies. Not the Instagram. I'm saying IG, big G antibodies. These show up later and stay in your blood. And the IgM antibodies, these show up early in the infection. So they mean the person has mumps right now. Now let's talk about why these lab tests are so important. Sometimes mumps can look like other diseases, like swollen glands caused by bacteria or other viruses. Lab tests help doctors make sure it's really mumps and not something else. Now, as you can see, we're talking about the symptoms of mumps. Now, if you have mumps, you'll probably experience peritonitis. Peritonitis, swelling and tenderness of the parotid glands. And you'll also probably experience other symptoms such as fevers, headaches, muscle cramps, fatigue, loss of appetite, trouble swallowing because your salivary glands hurt, feeling really tired. Some people, though, don't get any symptoms at all. They might not even know they have it. That's what's so crazy about mumps, is that you could really have it and not know. It can be common cold-like symptoms. It could be common fever-like symptoms. And it can be just things that you experience every day, like as a headache or feeling really tired. Alrighty, ladies and gents. So, let's talk about the pathophysiology of mumps. Well, how do you catch mumps? Mumps spreads pretty easily from one person to another. If someone who has mumps sneezes, coughs, or shares food or drinks with you, the virus can get in your body through your nose or mouth. Now, why is that such a big deal? Even though most people recover from mumps in a week or two, it can sometimes cause serious problems. For example, it might make it hard for some men to have kids later in life if it affects their testicles, or it could cause hearing loss if it damages the ear. Now, mumps is a viral illness that mainly affects the salivary glands, especially the parotid glands near your ears. Now, mumps is so contagious that before vaccines, nearly everyone would get it by the time they were teenagers. Now, to wrap this up, transmission of mumps expressed through the respiratory system. Now, direct contact with the infected can cause you to be infected. It replicates in the upper respiratory tract and regional lymph nodes. So here on the screen, you'll see a bunch of words, but let me break those words down for you. So, talking about the mumps virus, it first infects the cells in your nose and your throat, and we call it nasopharynx. Then it spreads into your blood and it travels to other parts of your body. It targets the parotid glands and makes them swell real big, which is why people with mumps often have puffy cheeks. You know when somebody says you have chubby cheeks? Well, in this case, it's not good to have chubby cheeks. That actually comes from mumps. Mumps often have puffy cheeks. The virus can also affect other areas, the brain or around it. It causes headaches and stiff necks. The testicles in males, especially after puberty, that can cause pain and swelling. The pancreas, which might make your stomach hurt. The inner ear, and sometimes this can lead to hearing problems. And nobody wants hearing problems. Trust. Treatment of mumps disease. Now, to treat the orchitis, the swelling of the testicles, rest, ice packs, and pain relievers can help. Now, to treat the meningitis, brain swelling, hospitalization may be needed with treatments like intravenous fluids and pain management. Hearing loss, supportive therapies like hearing aids may be used. Now, let's talk about some interesting facts. Now, I know what you're thinking. The 3 facts I have up on the screen don't seem that interesting. Well, let me tell you some things that aren't on the screen. Mumps is one of the oldest recorded diseases. Hippocrates, the famous Greek physician, described it way back in the 5th century. Now, let me talk about their chipmunk cheeks, which is a common symptom of mumps. Swollen cheeks for mumps were so common that the word mumps comes from an Old English word meaning lumps or bumps. Before vaccines, mumps was so widespread that even famous people like Elvis Presley and Olympic athletes got it. It's a silent spreader. Up to 30% of people with mumps didn't show symptoms, which makes it sneaky, kind of like a snake. Another fun fact of mumps vaccine: the current mumps vaccine is based on a strain of the virus named after a little girl named Geraldine. Her dad, Dr. Maurice Hillman, used her strain to develop the vaccine in the 1960s. Crazy thing is, it's still used today. Mumps may seem like an old-fashioned illness, but there's some fun facts about it that actually make it very interesting and still popular today. And last but not least, we have our reference page. Now, if you have any questions or you really want to look into the mumps disease,